Hey there guys, Musher here. If you don't know, I run a Legacy G-Series Discord server called Project G-Boot, where we hold monthly remote fight tournaments in order to relive the inner G with a custom ban list. And today will be the newest round of hits to that ban list and probably the biggest we've ever had at once. The reason I wanted to make this video today is because I believe we are genuinely getting close to making the most balance you can make the end of G. And if you do want to see the custom list that we have going on, which includes these new hits, it'll be currently here on screen. This is the completed list so far. Things like Coral is the next deck that that we're looking into, maybe a choice strict with Aqua and Coral. But we're gonna like to see how the meta sets first before we make any changes. We do this usually about twice a year, updating the ban list for this based on our results throughout that half of the year and how people are feeling from either our tournaments as well as private testings we've been doing. But I do genuinely think that we are getting pretty close to making this the best that you can really balance the end of G. Some things to note, however, is that we do use all modern game rules with the exception of Stride, so both players do have to be great 3 or greater to Stride, but that means modern once per turn, modern mulligan, modern deciding who goes first, modern best of 3 rules. Pretty much every single current game rule that is applicable to G outside of Stride, we end up using mostly because whenever we do have some people coming from other formats that haven't played G, which we've had a few, it's been pretty cool that way. It makes it easier for them to transition into them, especially if they've been playing Premium, but they never actually played the original G format. It's pretty much like, well, just keep playing with all your current rules, except for Stride. Both players just have to be great to be great at Stride. There's no exception to that. Our monthly tournaments are also across the whole month, so it is you get 3 to 4 days for each round to find your time with your opponent and make a best of 3, and that's the general gist of the primary thing that we do in Project G-Boot. Now, we do try some alternative formats. In fact, I do have a custom rule set for expanding on Premium called Premium DX. I'm making a video on that soon. It's just for casual play. It's not me trying to fix the Premium format. It's just, here's some fun ideas that you can do if you want to expand on the Premium format. And we try to balance it as much as possible. But, there's no way to really balance Premium hardly to begin with right now, much less all the crazy ideas we have. But that's another video for another time. Let's go ahead and get into the bans, the restriction list for this. Now, I should go ahead and go over the general philosophy for how we've been handling this list. First and foremost, we're not trying to kill a single deck from the energy. All the best decks from the energy are still the best decks. Our goal is to basically remove Tier 0 status and close the gap between Tier 1 and Tier 2 as much as possible, hopefully reining the power level back to between GBT 12 and GBT 13. Of course, it's still going to be feeling close to GBT 13, but more the speed of GBT 12 as much as possible. Of course, that's not super possible because card design is just card design. However, we have successfully made it to where a lot of games go to third Stride now, and that's really been a big thing. Now, the biggest thing on this list is going to be finally going after the Balam deck, because I think it's the last major big deck that's probably not Coral that we haven't gone after from the end of G. For Bermuda here, obviously, we just banned Ellie, which we'll get to here in a moment. Crook's limited to 1, and we had choice restrict between Anj and like her main GB2 grade 2, she would keep calling back out after you discard for Stride, keep bouncing, they keep powering up the field. So Anj has been feeling pretty strong, but pretty reasonable without this pretty much looping power gain to where if you play it right, you can get basically like 10 to 15,000 power for free each turn. But so yeah, Coral's definitely a deck that might get hit next, but like I said, we'll wait to see how things go. So we did originally have Ellie limited to 1 in choice restricted with Aqua. But Ellie kept feeling too strong, even like that. And that's mostly because she turns herself back face down immediately when she hits the G zone. If she was like all the other G guards to where you would have to wait a turn for that, I don't think this card would be banned. I think we would still just have limited 1 choice restricted with Aqua. The fact that it turned itself back face down immediately means that the Bermuda players with all the draw power they can already do can stack up on heals, and if they already have like 2 to 3 Sentinels in their drop, then it's just literally the freest, most massive shields in the game with all the great quality cards Bermuda already has, and this card basically just breaks game design. And for that reason, this is our first and only card we plan on banning. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and move on to the next round of hits. So this is our first hit to Lard, because Lard's actually been a pretty fair deck. It's just now that we've hit all these other decks, we figured that Lard might need a tap on the wrist on its resource engine, or its resource looping. So for that reason, we're going to go ahead and start by hitting Belial out 2. This may, go back up to 3 or 4 in the future. We'll see. I don't see us dropping it below 2 because I don't believe Lard is this overly unbeatable offender in the format. And then moving on to new experimental restriction, limiting Ezreal and Arca to 3. Arca being at 3 is definitely more of a pain than Ezreal at 3. And one of our main Lard player was suggesting we just go ahead and drop Ezreal to 2. But because this is a more experimental hit, and having Persona PGs be at 2 copies just feels wrong. So we're going to be starting off as trying to hit him at 3 just to see if that creates enough of a pain point, especially in conjunction with Belial Outlet 2, that maybe it'll hit the deck's resources up till we don't have to worry about it. But maybe also depending on ZTB, we may still end up limiting Arc of the 2 as well, because we want to keep ZTB's like whole combo game live, because we're not trying to take away any deck's identities. So while we have limited a lot of stuff to 1, the actual main combo lines in ZTP are still completely live. You can't heritage till 3rd stride, but we don't want to take any more away from their offense, because that's what ZTB is. So Arc, I believe, is like the only other thing we can realistically hit that we haven't already, and both these may go to 2 in the future. Arca may even go back to 4. I don't know. It's just an experimental hit. We're just going to see how the meta ends up conforming to this. Now is going into our first choice restricts here. This is our first Balam hit. Now, Balam was already hit to 2 before this, which did help mitigate the problem slightly with this deck, because it's no fight, no guard turns. We're just being too consistent, especially with the early game the deck could end up pushing out. And even on 1st stride, Baleful Repressor could still be hitting big numbers with the guard restrict on its own, regardless of what stride that you were on, which puts more pressure on your opponent for whenever you drop Balam. So we're choice restricting Baleful Repressor and Balam. Now, of course, you do still have Doppel Vampire, which is an infinitely worse version of Baleful Repressor. It's less power. Technically, its power comes off at 6 instead of 8 soul. But it's less power, and its guard restricted comes until you have 15 in soul, which means you're basically, like, rarely ever going to have this available on 1st stride. So that means basically the only guard restrict that you're going to have available on 1st stride is the rear guard Sharot, but that's a grade 3, which doesn't have shield. Which means you may bump this up an extra copy in your deck than you already weren't playing, which can create a bit of a pain point. And then we're going to be choice restricting Rhino and Magdamer. I don't know how to say that stride's name at all. But great, especially since we've hit so many other decks, like Great Nature already has so many amazing tools, including ways to restand the Rhino. This interaction just felt a little too unfair. We've had, a few tournaments where the seer came in 1st or 2nd, and no one's enjoyed playing against it, so I just went ahead and choice restricted these to 2. This should be our last Nova Grappler hit, I think, honestly, because the only hit we've had before this was choicing Drigger with Winning Champ, because 2nd stride GB8 was just being too consistent, and while most of the GB8s are trash, mostly because they are GB8, pretty much any deck's GBA on 2nd stride would be quite damn strong in this slightly slower G format, especially Drigger. So we went ahead and choice restrict Winning Champ and Drigger. But the favorite chant turns on 2nd stride still felt a little too strong. We don't want to take away Winning Champ at all, because that, we don't want to take away all the explosiveness and setup that Novas have. Now, of course, you still in the place of magical performance have things like Sazanza. You just have to work harder for that big power gain. Of course, you still have Gunzen and Ninja in the deck regardless. So you're still hitting big numbers. It's just with these 2 choice restricted, the explosiveness has to be worked for slightly more, which I think that's pretty much all we'll need to do to keep the deck's identity intact with the least amount of hits. Then moving on to our next DI hit, if you have Balam in your G zone, you can only include one copy of Monochrome Cat of Nightmare Land in your deck. So pretty much, we were debating on just hitting Monochrome the one in general, but by choicing it with Balam, this encourages this encourages basically the more control-focused version of DI, as well as maybe Blade Wings to be played, just to create more deck diversity, because that is one of our biggest goals with this list, since it is a limited format in general. Potentially in the future, Cat might get hit to one just completely, but we want to see how this goes first. And the final hit that we have here is Deranged Singular being banned as a starter. Of course, you can still play it in your deck, any number of copies. It's just simply, literally, if this card was a Quay Elemental, pretty much almost every single deck would play this card is just too good. And pretty much how we're going to be counteracting the Balam strategy is by removing this as your starter. Pretty much every other starter costs a counterblast to use, except for like the Nightmare Lane starter, which you might play in place of this. But I do believe like the GB like Bat starter goes to Soul charges 2 and draws 1 for a CB is probably the best bet. Of course, you do have Greedy Hand if you want to specifically go for a more control/toolbox version. And you even have the Darkness starter that kind of does that as well. But I don't think it's as good. So for that reason, basically this means that DI can no longer spam out an early field and then suck it all in the soul to build up and then just drop their big strides now. So they have to actually work for it, and the deck becomes a little bit more bricky. So between all of these hits, I do believe the Balam deck will still have, its finisher turn, because you can pretty much consistently on second strike have the 15 Silver Doppel, plus you'll also have access to your Rearguard Shara. Pretty much the whole goal with these hits is to make it so that we hit the resource engine, especially for Balam a bit, to make the deck a little bit more bricky, and pretty much make it so it's not doing much until second stride. So the downside to the Balam deck is that pre-second stride, it's probably not doing much outside of setup, but on second stride, then, if your opponent don't have the answer, they're dead. And of course, the deck still has plenty of other options, because you still have Werewolf Jaeger, as well as other options that can help you. Plus, in recovery, you have your, if you want to, you can play the Balloon to draw extra cards, or even your Recycling PG, that, the Angel, Succubus, whatever it is. It'll be on screen now. I'm getting its name off the top of my head. So, you do still have ways to keep getting extra cards into your hand to recover and kind of just even drop Blade or Miss, or even depending on your opponent's hand, if they survive the Balam turn or you want to wait on the Balam turn, Gildereus can still steal games if your opponent does not have a heal in their hand. So with that being said, that's it for this ban list video. Down below will be the link to the Discord, as well in both the description and the pinned comment. And that's going to be it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, have fun.